Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into OTRAMM's live Tuesday live chat, cruiser chat. Uh, Same format as usual. I don't have anything planned, so whatever questions you guys have, just throw them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. Trying to think what else is going on at the shop since last week. We pulled OneFZ out of an 80 series to do a bunch of oil leaks and got the first half of the OneFZ head gasket video up over the weekend. Dropped the head off at the machine shop yesterday. So as soon as I get that back, I'll do... I'm going brain dead. I'll do part 2 on reassembly on that. Got the last few bits I needed for the 4.7 motor that we've got out of the 100 series. Finished that up today. So Crash will probably start putting that back in the truck tomorrow. Yeah, he'll be finishing that up. I'm finishing up the last few touches on that never-ending 80 rear bumper because it's getting picked up Thursday. And then I'm prepping to start a batch of stainless exhaust. I've got 4 to build later this week into next week. Just waiting on a few flanges still to show up to start on those. But we got a rotary weld positioner today, so that should make it much easier. Much easier to crank those out a little bit faster. What else is going on? Capital Land Cruiser Club is having their live chat, I'm having live chat. Capital Land Cruiser Club is having Tech Day at the shop this Saturday, the 26th. So any of you guys that are local and want to swing by and meet all the guys in the Capital Land Cruiser Club, it's open Tech Day at the shop. You know, everybody's welcome to come by and hang out. So that's this Saturday, the 26th. I think we're starting at like 9 o'clock. And that's in Bealton, Virginia. And please excuse me, I'm a bit slow this evening. I'm pretty sure I'm coming down with the flu. So this may be a shortish live chat, but we'll see. I just took a bunch of Advil. So hopefully I am good to go for the next hour. And hopefully you guys can hear me. The microphone was acting funny when I turned it on. It wasn't doing the normal light up bar like it normally does. So hopefully this is coming through okay. I can see myself, but I can't hear because I'm not wearing headphones. Trying to think. We finally picked our country for the year. Okay, awesome, Eric. I appreciate it. We finally picked our vacation country for the year this year. My wife and I do a different foreign country every year, usually switching back and forth between Europe and Latin America, although we've been leaning more Latin America lately. But we're hitting Portugal this year, basing it out of Lisbon. So if anybody out there has any must-see, can't-miss sites or things to do in Portugal, in the Lisbon-ish area, let me know. His tour guide or tour books are great, but firsthand knowledge is always better. And it seems like people on here are from all over the place, so maybe somebody's familiar with Portugal. Oh, and an update on the OneFZ crank holding tool. I had hoped to have those in my hand from the water jet cutter this week. I called down there to check on them today, and it looks like they're going to ship out today or tomorrow. So I should have them the end of this week, early next week, which will be awesome. Because I'd like to make sure that I did all the measurements right when I drew them up in CAD. I measured it off the one I've been using for the last couple of years, but I changed it a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And I'm excited to have those in my hand. I think I ordered 5 of them to start out with. And Chase says 04 GX470 tapping sound when coasting in all forward gears, slowing down below 20. What do you think it could be? That's a good question. Noises like that are really hard to guess on without hearing them. Did it come on suddenly, or has it been doing it for a while? I've heard like little pebbles get stuck, in a brake caliper, things like that that'll make tapping sounds. Trying to think what else would make a tapping type sound while slowing down. Does it change with speed? Or does it change with direction you're turning or going straight? And like, how fast is it? Is it like tire rotation speed or like driveline rotation speed, which is faster? No change with speed or steering. Seems like tire speed. The first thing that pops to mind is I would look and see if there's a nail or a rock or a screw or something like that stuck in one of your tires. A lot of times you won't hear them accelerating, but slowing down since you're not under engine load. Sometimes you'll hear that tap 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 against the pavement. Yeah, because if it's with tire speed, maybe CV axle, but normally those will make a tapping noise more when you turn than go straight. So it's hard to say. My guess would be check for nails, rocks, something that's stuck in the tire and tapping. Or like Edgar says, maybe the brake pads if the shims aren't in there. I wouldn't think U joints, although anything's possible. I mean, maybe. But yeah, when you come in for a timing belt, we can always take it for a spin if it hasn't solved itself by then, and figure it out. And to Eric trying to track down the vibration that only you notice with the U joints, but didn't notice any vibrations with the drive shaft out. We haven't seen it in the 100 series or the 200 series yet, but the 80 series are getting to the age where the slip joints are starting to wear. And you'll get vibration from them. I want to say we checked yours and they felt fine, but there's always the chance that it's just a random thing that's hard to feel. We've had a couple of 80 series drive shafts that felt great, but we're still making noise. And then we put new drive shafts in them and all was well. And it was because the slip joint was howling just at a certain position. I hate to throw that out there as a guess, though, since drive shafts are super expensive. I'm trying to think what else. What else on either of those? Oh, I did see a weird one once. It was a big rock stuck. This is for chases. A big rock stuck between the skid plate and the front differential. And under decel, it was pinching that rock and tapping it against the skid plate. So that could also be a possibility. And to Eric on the drive shaft, you take the load off the drive shaft. So pick one tire up off the ground, like on the front end, so that there's no bind on the drive shaft, and then grab either side of the slip joint and try to twist them. It should only have just the littlest bit of play where the slip travel is. If it's going clock 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 clock, then they're worn. Or if you grease the slip joint and the sound changes for a while, it's a pretty good indicator that the slip joint's worn. Trying to think what else either of those could be. Nothing's really coming to mind. Yeah, random vibration, shimmy, shake, ticking, grinding noises can be so much fun to track down. We had an 80 series get dropped off this morning, and he had a complaint of check engine light, a complaint of like a whirling, dragging noise underneath, and like a weird transmission grinding noise. We got it up in the air. His oxygen sensor harness had come loose and was wrapped around the front drive shaft. So it was making all kinds of weird noises where the wires were dragging the drive shaft, and it had cut through and shorted out the oxygen sensors. So like 3 of his complaints were all one issue, which was crazy. And to Eric, maybe a motor mount, but we hardly ever see them go bad. I can't remember the last time I changed a motor mount or a trans mount for being bad that hadn't rusted out. And Sam's got terrible clatter, coasting above 30, and then grumbling rumble from 30 to 0. And that one happened after a T or transmission rebuild. Thinking about it, that one, with it happening right after a trans rebuild, I'd almost play with your high, low, neutral shift lever. I'm wondering if it's a little bit askew, or if one of the linkages is slightly bent, and the shifter hub is partly engaging against one of the, either high, low. I'm going brain dead here. If it's not completely engaged, if you're getting some chatter against one of the shift hubs in the transfer case, or if for some reason they had the shift motor for the center diff lock off and it's not keyed back in correctly, and that shifter is slightly out of whack. Which, yeah, I don't see how either of those things would go out on their own. I mean, it's always a possibility. But it's one of those, weird driveline noise that started with a transmission rebuild. I lean towards it being, a shifter issue in the transfer case. Yeah, I wouldn't see the switch helping, unless you had dash lights on. I'd try messing around with the high-low neutral shifter and see if it's there in, high and low range, even though you won't be able to get up to 30 in low range. And I'd also, if you've got a center diff lock switch, I'd see if it's there with the center diff locked and unlocked. See if that changes anything. Cool. And thanks, Eric. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, I'm hoping I feel better soon as well. I've got a ton of work to do, and I really don't want to be sick, especially with the Cruiser Club having tech day at the shop this weekend. That is not going to be fun, sick. So I'm hoping it was just too much paint fumes from painting a bumper this afternoon. I was wearing a respirator, but the respirator was not working super awesomely. Yeah, you're not really looking for the diff locks in the axle to engage and disengage. I'm thinking more the center diff lock. The one, it locks in when you put it in low range. Or if you've got the center diff lock switch and the pin mod, you can do it in high range as well. I'm thinking either that shift collar isn't fully engaging or is partially engaging when it shouldn't be, or like the high-low neutral isn't fully engaging or partially engaging. Slight leak on the rear axle driver's side. Any advice on the rear axle seals? The rear axle seals are super easy. You take the drive flange out, and there's two axle seals. There's a really small one that's inside the spindle, like where the axle shaft goes through. That one's probably your actual leak. So you'll need the little inside seal, the rear wheel seal, and the flange gasket where the axle shaft goes in. But it's the same idea as doing the front wheel bearings, except the adjuster lock is different. It's got one or two number 3 Phillips screws that lock a ring in, and then it's a weird adjuster nut. Instead of being like the 54 millimeter socket on the front, it's got 3 pegs that you engage to spin the nut off. But super easy, just get all the gaskets and seals and repack the wheel bearings while you're in there, because they're supposed to be running in grease. But if you're seeing a leak of gear oil, you've likely washed the grease out of them and they're just running in gear oil. Cruiser Brothers likely has a kit for it. I just get the parts from Toyota, just because it's easiest, unless I'm already ordering from Cruiser Brothers. But I usually never think of it when I'm ordering from them, so I just get them from Toyota. Trying to think if there's anything else funky. Wits End sells a cool socket that's a combo 54 millimeter front socket and rear adjuster socket that's really nice. I milled a normal 54 millimeter socket to copy his, and it's real handy. And Aaron's trying to figure out if he's got caster correction bushings without taking them off and inspecting. Normally, if you peek in there sideways, the most common ones that we see are the old man emu, and they're bright yellow. So if you look in sideways and you see a bright yellow bushing, then that's old man emu, and you've got caster bushings. Who is it? I think Dobinson's and a couple others sell black bushings, but they're weird. Like the factory bushing is pretty much smooth on the rubber, and the aftermarket adjustable caster ones, they're black and kind of ridged, if I'm remembering correctly. But more than likely, if it's got caster correction bushings, they're old man emus. That's like 99% of what we see in them, and they'll be bright yellow and pretty easy to see, unless somebody spray painted them. Or you could go get an alignment, and if they tell you your caster's way off, then you don't have bushings in there. Cool, thanks, Dave. Yeah, 94 with a 3-inch lift. It probably want to follow Road Crown fairly decently if it doesn't have caster bushings in it. But yeah, looking for the yellow is the only thing I can think of. Yeah, I mean, I've seen taller-ish lifts even with the caster bushings still follow Road Crown. So usually that means you need more caster. I'm not a alignment aficionado, but that's the way I understand it. Yeah, the springs on the wrong sides is fairly common. And you don't have, what we normally do is we pull the springs out and then we put the new springs next to them, and whichever is the tall side coming out, we replace that with the tall spring going in. So we keep track of it that way. But you not having the original springs, you'll just have to flip them and see which way around is better. Luckily on an 80, it's really easy to swap the springs back and forth. Biggest tire you can put on a 100 series? I don't know. We don't have a tire machine and balancer at the shop. So we'll put lifts on, and then the customer, orders tires from somebody else and goes and has them put on after we've done the lift. And I'm really terrible at paying any attention to what size tires people are running. So I don't know the largest you can put on a 100 series. I'm sure there's a gajillion threads on I Hate Mud. And awesome. Glad you found the fuse, Sam. They love hiding them under different labels. And Aaron, it depends on how much weird offset you've got. Like if one side the tire is sticking, out past the flare, and the other side it's inboard of the flare. If it's a very noticeable amount, then I would put an adjustable panhard in, to shift everything back centered. 2.5 inch, it's usually not noticeable. We don't normally, start really seeing it until like the 4-inch lifts. But yeah, if you look in and the axles aren't centered, then it's a good idea to put an adjustable panhard in. Weird whooping sound in a 96 FZJ80 around 1600, 2000 RPM coming from the EGR brake booster area. Off the top of my guess, I'm with you with vacuum leak. Either the booster itself is leaking, or possibly one of the rat's nests of vacuum lines that's up under the intake. Or possibly the two halves of the intake plenum where they bolt together. And Edgar's right. The easiest way to find those is to smoke test them. God, my smoke machine, it was one of those, really hated to buy it because it was stupid expensive, but man, does it save your bacon when you're trying to find a random vacuum leak. You just pump the whole system full of smoke and look for where the smoke comes out. That's weird. Are you getting check engine lights for anything? Because if it was a vacuum leak big enough that you hear it going down the road, I would assume you'd also have like a oxygen sensor reading lean code, something like that. I would assume whatever that vacuum is feeding would no longer be getting a proper signal, so you'd get a code for it. But yeah, that's another one without hearing it. That's a weird one. Because the only hose I can think of that'd be big enough to make a loud noise would be the one that feeds the brake booster. Unless the check valve in the brake booster is randomly failing and you're hearing that make a weird sucking sound. Yeah, I could see the check valve in the brake booster maybe making weird noise. I'm trying to think. There's a down and dirty way, and it's I'm trying to think of what it is. I'm going completely brain dead. It normally, like, if the brake booster is going bad, you'll feel it in the brakes. They'll go soft, they'll go firm. It'll change around. It'll change feeling on you. But the booster check valve might be making weird noises, but still supplying enough vacuum so that you wouldn't notice it. Um, Beyond taking the check valve out and blowing and sucking through it to make sure it's doing its thing, it's hard to say. Um, and a Devil Dog trucker, what size lift requires caster correction and longer panhard control arms? I'm assuming on an 80 series. We normally do caster correction at like 2 inches. And then panhard control arm, stuff like that at like 4 inches. I'm trying to think what the P0401 is. That's pretty sure that's EGR related. Let me. Yeah, it's the EGR insufficient flow code that it seems like every 80 series in the world has. I would really doubt that's related to your sound, but I guess it could be. Um, it's hard to say. I mean, it's personal preference of what you need at 3 inches. And the caster plate, the caster angles change, depending on how much lift you need. So like what works for 2 inch is different than 3 inch, is different than 4 inch. We don't do a ton of 3 inch. We normally do like the Old Man Emu that's like 2.5. And those get the Old Man Emu caster bushings or I think they're like 2 or 3 degree caster plates. Or we do, like the 4 inch, 5 inch slinkies, and those get the higher degree caster plates and panhards and slightly lower control arms in the rear. It all just kind of depends on what your angles end up being. Like Sam says, after everything settles out, it depends. It depends on what the angles are. There's not a real set formula, because it all varies depending on lift brand. Because one company's 3 inch lift and another company's 3 inch lift can be 2 completely different lift heights. It depends on if they're basing their 3 inches off of the height of a new truck, or if they're basing that 3 inches off the height of sagged out, 20-year-old springs. So I guess that's not a super helpful answer, other than it's kind of you just do them and then measure and see. We haven't done any of the Dobinson stuff. I put one of their rear bumpers on for a customer. I think it was 100 series rear bumper, and it was the biggest flaming pile of crap I have ever seen. Like we called him and told him, you don't even want to put this bumper on your truck. So that's really turned me off from doing any of their parts. So we haven't done any of their suspension. I know people seem to like them, but after seeing that bumper, I'm not a fan. I mean, if you've got the intake plenum gasket kit, you can take it apart. It's kind of a lot of work. And unless you can verify that you've got a vacuum leak there, I don't know that you're going to gain a whole lot out of it. It could be that you put all the new gaskets in and you don't have any change. I'm pretty sure Dobinsons don't do the slinkies. That's like Auto. It's Autocraft Australia, something like that. It's a different company. Um, but yeah, back to Logan. And I've yet to see an 80 series that needed valve adjustment unless somebody had screwed up the shims beforehand and put them back in the wrong order. So you probably won't gain a whole lot there. And I'm pretty, yeah, it's not Old Man Emu is not the Slinky either. It's a separate company. Like their springs look way different than all the other guys. I don't know what the hell is wrong with this idiot Winker Bean. Where was I? After deleting people that are idiots. It seems like every week there's at least one moron that just wants to come on and talk about poop. I just went completely brain dead. Code 71. Code 71, I'm assuming early OBD1 truck. Those are going to be fun. I unfortunately haven't had to diagnose one, so I don't have anything off the top of my head. And to Edgar, yeah, I banned him. I banned him the first time, and he came back. So I banned him again and just reported him. So yeah, I don't have any good suggestions on the Code 71. I'd have to look that one up. If you want, shoot me an email, and I'll try to look it up when I get a chance and see if I can think of anything that would be useful. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. And to Logan, yeah, fuel injector cleaning seems to be helpful. We've had a bunch come through, that are pretty choked. We take them and clean them and flow check them when we do the head gaskets, when we've got them out anyway. And it seems to help cleaning them up. I don't know if it's useful enough that I would take one apart that wasn't showing any symptoms and clean them. But if we've already got them out, it's useful. And to Devil Dog, my LX450 is not coming. We're just so slammed at the shop right now that it hasn't moved from where I parked it. We haven't even brought it into the shop to put it on the lift and check it over yet. Hopefully one of these days when we get caught up, I'll be able to mess with it some. Yeah, to Aaron, the early OBD trucks, they can be a lot of fun to diagnose because you don't have live streaming data like the OBD2 stuff does. It's so nice just being able to watch all the sensor data and see what's going on. It's so much more easy to diagnose things. And to Nigel, suggestions for a battery in his 80. I'm a huge fan of the Odyssey batteries. But that's from like 10 years ago. I'm sure there's like a bunch of other stuff that's super awesome. With replacements we do at the shop, we generally, just use, a mid-level part store battery because they've all got a decent warranty on them. And if you go with a name brand, big chain battery, you can get it warranted, anywhere. So that seems to be the easiest. And yeah, I need to give it some love and make a video. It's just we've been so swamped. No, the Optimas are made in Mexico. Optimas are flaming piles of crap. Odysseys, I'm pretty sure, are still made in the USA. Yeah, we've had Optimas brand new off the shelf that don't work. Yeah, I mean, Interstates, are good batteries. Because, and in the regular, like, Interstate style battery or, house brand battery, there's only like 3 companies actually making them all. You just have better levels of quality control between them. But, the mid-grade ones, they all seem to be the same. So we use them, pretty indiscriminately. And we don't really see one that fails more than another. Let me let the dogs out real quick. You can go outside. Yeah, I mean, even Walmart batteries. And Logan, is there any charts to look at and to know expected vacuum? So normally, idling, you're going to be 15 to 20-ish. Cruising down the road, a good tight engine, probably 15 inches of mercury vacuum. Much lower than 15 is usually an issue. And I'm sure you can find a chart because, people used to use the vacuum gauges as like a mile per gallon, like fuel economy meter. The higher the vacuum, the better economy you're going or getting. I'm going brain dead again. But yeah, if you look up, there's probably like fuel economy versus vacuum charts online. Like all my older stuff from the 80s have a vacuum gauge in it, so I can watch it while I'm driving and, and judge fuel economy and engine condition. And Devil Dog wants to know if it's safe to add a low boost turbo to a 1FZ. The guys in Australia seem to do it all the time with good results. Here in the US, you could get the TRD supercharger kit for the 1FZ, which was like 5 or 6 PSI a boost. And, those hold up great. I don't know that I would do it on a super high mileage 1FZ. Although I'm seriously considering turbocharging the LX450 with 350,000 miles on it just to see what happens. But, the supercharger really wakes them up. Oh, and I just realized you can see that I'm wearing my pajamas on camera when I let the dogs in and out. Yes, I'm wearing my pajamas. But yeah, it seems like if you stay around the 5 or 6 PSI range, super and turbocharging are pretty safe. Supposedly, I've got 2 customers waiting on Wits End's turbo kit to come out in the spring. So yeah, supposedly I'll get to put 1 or 2 of those on. So it'll be really interesting to see. The pictures I've seen of that kit look amazing. And everything Joey does is super awesome. Oh, and Edgar's got a good point in finding vacuum leaks using brake clean. It's not the super safest method. I've caught things on fire doing it that way. but it is an easy way to check for vacuum leaks. You squirt stuff with the brake cleaner. And if your idle changes, there's a leak because it's sucking brake clean through. Is there kind of pump? Some kind of pump you can test the booster. Yeah, they make like the little handheld vacuum pumps. A lot of times they take so much pumping that it's hard to tell anything. So it's hard to say, but yeah, you can get Mighty Vac little vacuum pumps and diagnose. And usually they come with a little book on how to diagnose vacuum-related things. And a Devil Dog Trucker, what do you think about lunchbox lockers? In my youth, when they were all that I could afford, I ran lunchbox lockers, and they were fine. They held up. They have really screwy road manners, especially in the snow, ice, sand. Anything with low traction. They're screwy. Long sweeper curves on the highway. They'll engage and disengage. If you're used to it, it's fine. If you're just not used to driving one of the lunchbox, they can take you off guard and they can be screwy. I much prefer, like a hair up e-locker or like a full Detroit. Even though it's still a ratcheting style in the Detroit, they seem to engage and disengage more controllably. Like you can anticipate it. And yes, there is a method of pumping the brake pedal, and I am just completely drawing a blank on it at the moment. Like with the engine off, like after the engine's been running and you turn the engine off, you should get a couple of pumps, and it should feel normal, and then it should start to firm up, as you run out of vacuum that's stored in the booster. So, it should get firmer as you pump it with the engine off. When you turn the engine on, the pedal should sink some as it builds vacuum. And I'm almost positive there is something else to that test, but I just cannot remember it at the moment. Yeah, it's crazy what people are swapping as far as diesels. All the different Cummins diesels, the Volkswagen stuff, the Mercedes OM 606 maybe. It's like people are pulling diesels out of everything and stuffing them in things lately. And to Devil Dog, shop's in Bealton, Virginia. We're about an hour southwest of Washington, D.C. Kind of between D.C. and Charlottesville. Yeah, like your brake booster should hold pressure or hold vacuum even after you turn off the motor. That's the reason the check valve is there. So like if your engine dies, you've still got one or two pumps of the pedal that are assisted. And that's why, like, if you turn the motor off, you'll have assisted pedal, and then it'll start decreasing on assist, and the pedal will get harder. Or like when you first get in it, like on a first thing in the morning, the pedal you hold down on the brake pedal, and when you start the engine, it'll drop some as you gain vacuum assist from the engine building vacuum. And to Aaron, thinking of mounting a light bar to the roof rack, any recommendations on how and where to run the wiring? Still going brain dead. I usually try to come in like the rear door, like rear hatch jamb, and kind of come down the gutter and in through there. I'm not a huge fan of drilling holes through the roof to pass wires through that way. So I normally try to come in through the rear hatch jamb, but we don't do a ton of them. And to Logan, I'm pretty sure you can buy just the check valve. And it's just, there's a little tab that comes off of one of the master cylinder mounting bolts that kind of just hooks over a pin on it and holds it in the hole. They're real easy to take out. So I'm pretty sure you can get just the booster. If you can't from Toyota, I'm almost positive you can in the aftermarket. I've just never tried looking one up. Part 1 of the head gasket video went up on Saturday. Install depends on how fast the machine shop gets the head back to me. Usually he's about a week. I dropped the head off yesterday. So, take probably a week or so to get the head back. And then I'll just have to schedule it in among other work at the shop to start reassembling. So I would guess probably 2 weeks for the second half. And to Sam, is 2 batteries always better than 1? If you're running a fridge, if you're running lights all night, something like that, then having a second backup battery that you can draw down and not kill your starting battery is a good idea. For the vast majority, though, 1 battery is just fine. And as cheap as you can get the little lithium jump packs, the case for having dual batteries is becoming less and less, unless you're winching all the time or running a freezer fridge or something like that. I'm not really seeing the need for them as much anymore. You can probably come in through the rear hatch and then down like the panel trim, that runs right inside the hatch, down the trim, and then behind the quarter panel trim and all the kick plates. Basically, you've just got to take everything off trim-wise to run the wiring, but you shouldn't have to drop the headliner. I would not drop the headliner. It is not fun. And to Logan, have I played with timing on a OneFZ FE for power gains? I have not. With them having cam and crank sensors, I'm not sure how much you can tweak it before the computer gets angry. Now, my old 22RE in my 4Runner, I've got the timing crammed way up on that thing for extra power, but it's OBD1 and it's not monitoring as many sensors. So it doesn't know that I've rammed the timing up that high. Although it will ping and knock if I don't run mid-grade gas in it. I could see the OneFZ being unhappy with the knock sensors jamming too much timing into it, but I've never actually tried to test that theory. in cold weather, I mean, having more capacity might be better. But I would almost just get a larger capacity single battery, something with more cold cranking amps. When you go to adding the dual batteries, you've got to have the isolator, and the switching to go back and forth and the extra cables. It adds a lot of complexity to the system, that doesn't always gain you great returns. But yeah, I mean, like, I ran dual batteries in my old 4Runner, and my back battery died, I don't know, at some point. And it was like, I'd never used it. So I never bothered to replace it. So I just rode around with a dead battery in the back forever. Still wired up, but not doing anything. Like, if it's super cold there, I'd almost think you'd be better served with like a plug-in trickle charger, or like a block heater to keep the engine oil warm, to make it easier to turn over. But I also have never really lived somewhere where it's super, super cold for long periods of time. So I'm just kind of pulling that all off the top of my head. I know what an A343F transmission is, but I've never taken one apart. God, that's miserable, -30. I rebuilt an automatic transmission like 15 years ago, and got it all back together. Everything worked. It was totally fine. But there's so many things that can go wrong rebuilding an automatic that I swore that I would never, ever do it again. So yeah, I rebuild manual transmissions at the shop all the time, but we don't do the automatics in-house. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot of input on them. Yeah, I've never looked in the owner's manual for temps that low, but I would assume that it's a much lighter oil when it's that cold out. And that's cold. Anyway, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to jump off of here for the evening. My Advil is wearing off and my head's pounding. But I wanted to say thank you for everybody that tuned in, everybody that's had questions, everybody that's helped answer other people's questions. It's super awesome, the exchange of info on here. So yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Oh, I'm pretty sure I've got the flu. So I took a bunch of Advil before Cruiser Chat to try to get my headache under control. And it's wearing off. But yeah, so I'm gonna jump off of here. Thanks to everybody that tuned in. If you haven't, subscribe below. If you really dig the channel, check out our Patreon link. Support is always appreciated. Yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week. And thanks for all the awesome video love. Catch you later. I took a hot shower right before I got on here, and it did make me feel better. Maybe I need to take another one. I will not leave you guys with that mental image. Anyway, thanks. I'll catch you guys next week.